and welcome to the No Drama Dhamma podcast for the Cancer Center of Contemplative Traditions for the University of Leipzig. This time I have the great pleasure to introduce you to James Gentry from Stanford University. James has worked extensively on the interaction of mind practices, of meditation practices, contemplation, and material objects, pills, amulets, blessing cords or protection cords, many things that are handed out by Tibetan lamas in the context of meditation teaching or student-teacher interactions that are destined to further the meditation practice of the students. So, very happy to be able to share this podcast with you. You spend a lot of time in Nepal, or?
Yeah, I guess in total maybe about 10 years. I'm not continuously, but over the decades.
And I think that's quite a good start for a conversation, because you said you went to Nepal in 95, I think, in search
It was
Buddhist practice.
my first visit was 94, just a year before.
Yeah.
And then I ended up getting hooked on Buddhism basically, and and meeting lamas and really wanting to learn meditation and being very impressed with lamas, especially that I met, who seemed to have a lot going for them.
I could very well relate, because you said that you actually went because you thought there wasn't anything available where you were in the States.
Yeah, exactly.
And I went to India with the same thought from Germany, 94, in the end of 94, beginning 95 for 3 months.
Oh, that's great.
Because I was under the same impression.
Totally. Yeah, I didn't really know that Khenchen Kuncho Gyaltsen, the Drikung Kagyu Kempo, was living in Washington, D.C. at that time that I went to. I only learned that in Asia, when I came back, that there was this great Kempo and all this stuff going on near me.
Yeah. There's again, the same thing happened to me, on a bus ride. I met kind of an old hippie who told me, yeah, in France, there's this big Kagyu meditation master, and it's very difficult to find somebody like this here in India. And so there was Lama Gendun, with whom I stayed after.
Wow. So fortunate. Yeah, Lama Gendun. I never met him, but I heard so much about him.
Yeah.
Really impressive figure.
My interest was just practice and meditation, and actually the whole academic thing came later. And the whole thought of devoting my time to also learning some of the structures from another perspective, that came years later.
Yeah, that was exactly my case. I had no intention of going to graduate school. It was just simply after several years of going back and forth. So I grew up in Washington, D.C., which is basically a service economy, so no industry whatsoever. But what it meant is that you could just kind of drop in and have a job pretty much the next day doing something, getting tables or whatever, or working retail or something like this. So I was this person who just went back and forth between Asia and Washington, D.C., between Kathmandu mostly and Washington, D.C. for years, and just keeping money together and then, making it last as long as possible until I ran out, and then I'd go back and work more. And then a friend, my Douglas Duckworth, who is an old friend of mine, he's a scholar who works at Temple University in Philadelphia. But we are from the same place outside of Washington, D.C. And so we grew up together, and strangely ended up having a very intertwined fate, in the sense of, living abroad for a long time and becoming Buddhist and interested in Buddhism. And he convinced me, oh, well, there's funding for people like you who go to graduate school and can kind of, keep this thing going. And so he sort of convinced me that was a viable thing for me to consider.
Yeah. But this is so, Because what you do is, it's wonderfully fills a gap in what I try to document with the different podcasts, is that practice isn't just mind practice as often is imagined, like dissociated from anything physical, dissociated from the environment, dissociated from concepts or whatever, and like, of course, if you grow up, especially in the Tibetan society, you're exposed to all the imagery, you're also exposed to all the things you get in your hand, the ritual instruments or the objects and the shrine building, the whole work aspect, you can even say. And I don't know how much you have also investigated this. Most what I saw from you was investigation into what I know as liberation upon taste, liberation upon touch, upon wearing, out of the 5 liberations in the Dzogchen system. This, of course, is very interesting. Like you said, you were given a pill, you were given a very outstanding meditation instruction. At the same time, you were given a bag of pills with instructions that they have the same value. And I've come across pills a lot of. I do have a stack of pills here in my house, but what is it about?
Yeah, that was really one of the things that was has been driving my curiosity these years. Precisely that sort of, what is that about? And so there's the bag of pills that you're given after really amazing meditation instructions, or maybe an amulet or something like that too, or maybe a combination of both. It's happened also, and being told, okay, this is really important also. And for me, I coming with a lot of assumptions about how things are divided, and with this whole kind of background thinking, oh, this, to avoid spiritual materialism and all this kind of stuff, I was quite perplexed. But my respect for the lamas that taught me and gave me those things caused me to assume that there must be something significant to it that I just don't understand. And I think that aspect of just assuming, okay, well, there must be something to it that I just don't get, even if I can't quite harmonize these things, is an important place of inquiry, to kind of bring about inquiry into anything, actually. I don't know, precisely those moments of incommensurability, or where we're kind of left hanging, we don't get it, something is completely off in our own conception, where we kind of, I guess it's like when the rug is pulled out from under us, or something like that, some kind of image like that, where there's the moment of the kind of hermeneutical moment, I guess you could say, where sort of entry point into a world that one has never been a part of. And so then hanging around a lot in Kathmandu and asking questions about these things, that it became more open to me that, oh yeah, these kinds of objects are really rich, kind of contemplatively oriented devices, actually. It's not just a matter of sort of superstition or something that not connected to the sort of practitioner world, or the advanced practitioner world, but integral to it. So then it was just fascinating to me, because I had never experienced such things. I grew up in a fairly a-religious environment, so
so you didn't necessarily draw connections to like Christian rituals or whatever, which maybe people who had grown up with would. I didn't either. I was also not particularly exposed to especially in Christian tradition as an insider. I was made go to church by school, but I pretty much zoomed out, and I wasn't part of the community really. So
yeah, I know what you mean. Me too. Kind of a few church experiences, but just kind of, okay, this is not for me, kind of.
When you have pills, I think it's quite interesting to see the process that they are also made. I mean, in certain ways, you have done also historical research. I mainly know the present, that, for example, in certain rituals you do, in certain practice cycles, or upon a deity, you do 7 days practice as a so-called drupchen, which goes on 24 hours. And as a conclusion of this, there's a blessing ceremony for the medical substances. And then the practitioners gather together and they kind of take these dry substances. They introduce some alcohol, some liquid to make it stick, and they start rolling pills for several hours every day to leave them out drying and then pack them. And part of the ceremony, part also of the meditation is to like sort of infuse the meditation into the pill so that the pill might liberate the meditation when ingested. Does it make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that same pattern, as far as my reading goes and my research goes, pertained in the past as well. And I think probably, I mean, it's I can't be sure, but I think it was around the 13th century, sometime, with the figure Guru Chuang,
Mm-hmm.
the famous Nyingma figure from 13th century. That that combination, that whole pattern really was set in place. I'm sure those things existed beforehand too. I mean, we read about them in the tantras that are coming from
Mm-hmm.
India, but the very specific sort of drupchen phenomenon centering on pills and the way that it's practiced today and all that probably comes about at that time. I think, even though of course there are things that it's based on that come from earlier periods. So that, yeah, that pattern has really been persistent over the centuries, and it's really, that's the thing that participating in those kinds of drupchen for me was an extremely eye-opening experience, and not just great practice, which, I mean, I love the communal aspect to it too, which really flies in the face of a lot of assumptions about contemplative practice, I think, today, where
Mm.
it's so very individualistic and very kind of interior and all these kinds of things. There, it's like we're doing it together. We all know what each of us are supposed to be doing and visualizing, and it's a collective and it's work, like you said. I think
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
a really good term.
there's so many tasks. I remember one very early day when I started to practice. I asked one of my first teachers, I went to him and asked him, yeah, wouldn't it be nice, if we could all sit together and meditate? And he looked at me perplexed and he said, what for? He said, if you want to sit, just sit, go to your room and sit, he said. He was very much of the idea that if we are together, we have to do something, and the idea of just sitting together didn't make much sense to him. So I kind of most likely had caught this idea from Zen or Theravada practice, which was quite omnipresent at the time. And I thought that would be a nice idea for us to do as a small group. He wasn't overly fond of it. His argument was like it would be more beneficial to join force, sort of, in chanting, in I think in an accumulation of merit in some more active practice.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I guess the when I'm thinking of meditation, I'm sort of, maybe I'm not thinking of it in terms of like just the term gom gyap or something like that, or but in in terms of this larger sense of like together
Mm-hmm.
chanting and doing all these kinds of things, like cultivating dispositions, I guess. But yeah, the tradition of being alone on your ass, like somewhere isolated, is certainly there. Very strong, especially with the Kagyu tradition.
Yeah, yeah. And
As we know from Milarepa and many other masters.
yeah, and there are also these two phases. I mean, you can do the same ritual alone on your own butt, on your cushion, to train it and to become proficient in the meditation. But that's not exactly what you're doing at the drupchen. Kind of, if people gather at the drupchen, there's some pivotal figures that actually really trained, and the others they are pulled along. They have a more performative role within the ritual. And so those who have done longer retreats, who have done intensive practice, they kind of also act as Lopen or Vajracharya to guide the ritual and to delve into the meditation that is described within those texts?
Yeah, that resonates with my limited experience too. Like just to see, the experts kind of guiding us through the steps, and non-experts like myself just tasked with different functions, but expected to follow along, of course, but with less expectation as well for what that can bring to the group.
Mm.
you know and more expectation in terms of what my hands might be able to bring, or kind of carrying things from place to place, or you know what I'm saying.
I also think it does have a very, as you said before, a communal aspect, because different people with different levels of training, with different abilities, also might find different roles.
Yeah,
Like,
that's it's really fascinating that way.
like you have a very active person who actually might not be overly either inclined or enabled to actually sit much, but within a ritual, within a tantric ritual, you can still find a place in a contemplative practice that actually suits you if you're very active. Or if you're not very active, then it's easier. But like, I think it has a lot of functions. Also, some of the drupchens, they include, you might say, the common folk, people who have no training, they can just sit in and, depending on their abilities, read along and or just sit and just be there. I always felt the pills have such a wide variety of functions also. They're given to like really advanced practitioners with who have great respect for them, but they're also widely distributed to people like farmers or whatever. If you go to rural countryside, and they might view them different, but they're distributed very largely, some of the pills.
Yeah, they really are. One use that I've encountered a lot is even beyond the human realm. So breaking them up and putting them into bodies of water, the
Yeah.
ocean, big lakes, or even burning them to kind of, you know, feed hungry spirits or other non-humans
Mm.
and benefit them in some way. You said a very wide range. It's true. All the way from the very elite kind of expert practitioners, all the way to the non-human realm.
Yeah, and I think some pills are extremely highly valued. Like there was the famous black pill of the Karmapa that was done in the
Yeah,
80s, and they had a certain stash of them. And like as the stash was dwindling, then people were really craving to get their hands on a piece of one.
yeah. Somebody just brought this to me actually from
Uh-huh.
Tibet. Real nak.
Ah, yeah.
This was a gift from a student here at
Mm.
Stanford who was doing field work on the Choling Tersar Terne, and she was there in Kham and was given a few of these. So I guess they're still doing them in Tibet. It's true, yeah. Some are so highly revered, and even to the point where they wouldn't be eaten, right? They'd just be
Yeah, they're
leave
carried in a amulet,
or
in a gao, yeah, and
put on
wrapped
a
up in
shrine.
a silk, or sometimes they're also treated as like an emergency medicine. Like uh, I had the feeling some people keep it like if they would go towards the last breath, the last thing they want to do is like take this holy pill.
Yeah, yeah, yes, that makes complete sense considering what
Mhm.
it's supposed to do, and its infusion with so much mantra and
Yeah.
practice.
And also often infused with relics and maybe sometimes homeopathical doses, you might say, because there is a pill that contains, sometimes you have whole lists of contained relics that are in a pill that might have been from a whole bunch of pills. Like you have, I saw
Yeah.
such lists, like some garment of Milarepa or a
Hmm.
strand of hair from Longchenpa or something like this. But actually, as this one pill gets broken up into another batch of pills, it kind of is believed to carry on the power that this one pill had.
Yeah, they often call that. I mean, I'm sure you know the popgyun or the pop, like the fermentation agent.
No, this I've never heard.
It's this
Mhm.
term that's used for the fermenting agent in beer or curd or yeast. And so that little bit from the previous batch is often
Mhm.
called the
Yeah.
fermentation agent continuum, the popgyun, or just
Yeah.
sometimes or just pop, with all of those different relics in it. One of the things that I've observed that also Dan Martin has made some observation about in his work is how the ingredients are often very specific to certain sectarian formations or combinations of sectarian formations.
Mhm.
And you can kind of read through the recipes the different affiliations of the institution that made them, and so it becomes very interesting.
Yeah, I think there's also certain traditions, certain school sects, whatever, that might be very opposed to have certain objects from another school that they are not too much in harmony with being inserted in their pill.
Yeah, that's a thing that in I have a book that's almost out. It's coming in June on the history of the mani pill,
Hmm.
and in the book I talk a little bit about Karma Chakmé.
Hmm.
Karma Chakmé was really very interested in mani pills because, of course, he was very interested in Avalokiteśvara and all these kinds of things, and Avalokiteśvara practice, and especially the 7-syllable form of the mantra. So Om Mani Padme Hum with the Hri added,
Hmm.
sort of the Nyingma kind of variation of the mantra. And he has a lot of really interesting remarks about what can and cannot be combined, and different, sort of how to maintain the integrity, the samaya integrity of the pill. And so it's
Mm.
precisely along the lines of what you were observing. And yeah, he's got some great, I mean, he's was so brilliant, and observed so many things, great
Yeah.
historian, scholar. So his works were a real guide for me in getting into the history of this particular pill.
Yeah, he's great precision. I only know his Reacher, some sections, and this is an extremely clear book, I believe. Did a lot of smaller Karma Kagyu commentaries. He was quite instrumental actually when the Karma Kagyus had difficulty to actually get their text and practices in order after certain political struggles. Then he actually rewrote a lot of material to help the Kagyus get back to life and have their practices being manageable, not so
Right.
extensive in sometimes in volume, but very important instruction manuals he wrote for the Karma Kagyu.
Yeah, that's I was really fascinated with his Gelwa Gyamso, this Jinasagara cycle, that he wrote a lot on that, and that makes sense given what you're saying, the context. Ganen Pochang persecution of the Karma Kagyu.
Exactly. There was like very few. I think he was able to get his hands on some material that wasn't widespread anymore. He could condense certain commentarial works again into more comprehensive manuals and have them spread again. I think he also had a lot of agency because he was also rooted in the Paleo tradition, in the Nyingma tradition. So I think he had a lot of possibility to actually spread his works, and that was very helpful.
Yeah, wonderful.
Mm.
Yeah, his writings are exceptional. I mean, I only know them in piecemeal, of course. There's just it's as though he spent his entire life writing.
It's safe to say you could just retire and just be with Karma Chakmé's works and like that. Also because they're so wide spanning, he didn't just go into one direction. It's a little bit like, I think, like Kongtrul, he had Dzogchen and Mahamudra works, and he had Kagyu practices and Nyingma practices. Then he also restructured the whole Namcho cycle, or he structured it at all, because I think it was quite of a firework when Mingyo Dorje revealed it. It wasn't much practicable.
Yes, yeah, he really curated that into system. It's quite amazing what he did over his career.
Mm.
Yeah, even just his work that centers on the mani pill is like volumes. I mean, he wrote about that and had big concern with connecting Jinasagara practice with this what was Terma practice. Also read Avalokiteśvara in Yapyom. Very close, very similar, but with some pronounced differences. So he was sort of careful to bring those cycles into, treat them as distinct, but also discuss how they could be related, how they might be related in practice. Like, to what extent can we do the pill from the Terma tradition in the context of Jinasagara, drupchen, this kind of.
And so he did not actually rely on the classic four-armed white Avalokiteśvara that is like super widespread, that most images we see, if we were just to go online, we see quickly the white four-armed Avalokiteśvara, and the red is actually very rare to see if you don't know what to search for.
Yeah, he did also, I mean, he was really, it seems to me at least, really into all the forms and the white one too. But for tantric pill practice and for his own sadhana practice, it seems, maybe I mean, like, he talks about having done a very long Avalokiteśvara retreat, and that's in the context of discussing this red form. So it seems that could have been his preferred Yidam form.
Yeah.
And that he was really into Ratna Lingpa's revelation of a similar, anyways, this Tuchi Chenpo Sangwa Duba. So it's like named after the Guya Samaja, but it's got Mahakarunika as part of it with a Yapyum form. So he was a practitioner of this form, which is very closely cognate with Guru Chuang's Tuchi Chenpo Yangying Duba revelation. It's almost like a verbatim. The revelation is very, very close. It's like a re-revelation of Chuang. But then Karma Chakmé was also really an avid practitioner of this Jinasagara cycle, which is very close, similar, but different, and really connected with the Karmapas, I'm sure, as you know. And and he wrote hundreds and hundreds of pages on the history and development of this Jinasagara, and then many different sadhanas and different things connected with it, probably in the efforts to preserve or bring back.
Actually, this before TBRC, all this stuff was like really difficult to get your hands on. Like when we started out practicing, there was still, people were hunting for text in India, trying to find one copy that you could slap on a photocopy machine somewhere, and get it back. And all of this like really disappeared, the scarcity of text needed for the preservation of practice cycles and so on. Now this question is completely resolved by the merit of Gene Smith and all others working there. So when we practiced, actually this long commentary was first not available.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's the practice instruction manuals, they were complete, but this huge volume with the whole history, and I do think it also has like sort of defense for the practice, like other longer commentaries often have to make statements about the authenticity of the practice cycle and to defend it against maybe criticism from other schools, other lamas who don't teach it, to reaffirm the tradition. I have heard about it, but I've not seen it.
Yeah, I got a bit into those defenses in the in this book that's coming out. It's just one chapter, is focusing in part on Karma Chakmé and his connection with this mani pill, sort of his role in promoting the mani pill and as something connected with Jinasagara. And so that's sort of just part of the story, I guess you could say, that figures in there. But I read those, but just to get historical information and beautifully written. It's too bad that people didn't have them before. Now we have this amazing digitized edition of Karma Chakmé's writings in many, many volumes, and it's wonderful. It can be available.
And this actually is still practiced, the pill ritual, the pill making?
it is still practiced today. There's a Gelupa adaptation of it that
Mm-hmm.
started in the 17th century with the fifth Dalai Lama. I It's clear that he was trying to take it over from the Kagyupas because it
Mm.
had already kind of entered into the Kagyupa monastic fold in the 15th and 16th centuries through the help of certain people like Ratnalingpa and so forth. And Karma Chakmé gives evidence that that was the case already by his time, even though he's a little, he was around the time of the fifth Dalai Lama, of course. But then the Ratnalingpa form of it continued and inspired other forms. So it's still practiced in the highlands of Nepal
Mm-hmm.
and in Bhutan, in different places in Bhutan, and the Gelupa variant, which is really based on the Terma form of it, even though the sources are allied,
Mm-hmm.
because no one would want to deal with that. That's practiced in Dharamsala now, so they'll produce.
Mm-hmm.
So the current Dalai Lama produces the mani pills, but mostly, yeah. So today it's a kind of a variant of a Mindraling tradition and a Pema Lingpa inspired
Mm-hmm.
tradition. But let's go back to Ratnalingpa and back
Yeah.
further. It's the Guru Chowang, and the Gelupa one is the fifth Dalai Lama being super innovative and
Mm-hmm.
basically taking it over and creating a new tradition
Yeah.
quite expressly, very openly, and admitting it as he's doing it. It's really a fascinating instance of kind of the formation of expressly created tradition
Mm-hmm.
in
And you
Tibetan
think
Buddhism.
he did it simply because there was a need for it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it was Gelupa monasteries were asking for something like that, as he
Mm-hmm.
puts it, and he saw it also as an opportunity to do what that kind of pill ritual can do, which is to sort of bring a lot of people together
Mm.
under the auspices of making an association with Avalokiteśvara and the Dalai Lamas,
Ah, yeah, that's of
counteracting
course the obvious
the Kagyu and the Karmapa
connection. Yeah.
connections.
And to make pills, did you find anything that like is a qualifier? I mean um, that is a prerequisite for a lama to be able to make pills, having done, I mean, in classic, for many tantric activities, many performances of tantric rituals, we have like the necessity of having accomplished an approach recitation of the yidam practice of the deity in retreat, for example. Is this also a prerequisite for being able to supersede a pill making ritual? Did you find
Yeah,
anything?
I haven't found any explicit guidelines in terms of prerequisites for who is qualified to make pills. Um, I've What I have noticed is that the authority of the one who makes them is quite guaranteed within the community as a prerequisite to having the pills trust, and also the things that happen during the pill rituals, like
Mm-hmm.
the pills boiling over, the things, different signs and so forth, is then an index for the populace, for the authority of the pill maker.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen any prerequisites there for that.
Okay. What you said, I also saw that often, for example, if a very high ranking lama or a lineage holding lama, such as Dujom Rinpoche or the Karmapa, etc., were at a monastery, they would do a pill making ritual, having him head either the whole ceremony or the final day to bless the ceremony or to lead it. This I've seen quite often.
Yeah, there at some point there was a real drive to because, well, what happened with this particular pill, the mani pill, is that tertans, so treasure revealers, were claiming to reveal relics that are the flesh of Avalokiteśvara. And so then you have the flesh of Avalokiteśvara being revealed from the Tibetan soil
Ah,
and as the main active ingredient because it's it's this potent flesh from Avalokiteśvara, having decided to reincarnate in particular forms for 7 successive lifetimes, and then sharpening their flesh that they leave behind after the 7th lifetime with enough potency to serve as a catalyst for the pills. And then we have the relic from Avalokiteśvara, and then there was an interest among especially Ratnalingpa in the 15th century to have the Karmapas preside over the production of the pills and the consecration of the. So you would have essentially Avalokiteśvara consecrating Avalokiteśvara's flesh.
Yeah.
And so that became a massively important element that then the Dalai Lamas took over.
Does this also coincide with the teaching that, because you said the 7th birth, in one text I also read about the 7th birth as a Brahman. The Brahmin would then lead to superior siddhis of the person just by the purity of birth, and that his remains would then act as an agent to produce accomplishments. This was, I think, mostly about worldly accomplishments such as magical feats, but maybe there's a mirroring or same for supreme accomplishments of enlightenment that goes in the same direction.
Yeah, it's exactly as you say. The idea seems to be coming into Tibet through the Hevajra Tantra, Chakra Samvara Tantra, and other, like the Vimalaprabha commentary on the Kala Chakra as well as this. And then this is my sort of my argument in the book, is that what happens is that Padampa Sangye comes this sort of paradigmatic 7th born Brahmin, and that his death in Tibet, in Dingri, sets the stage for a controversy around his relics that then develops over the course of in the Shiche, in the pacifying tradition, over the course of a century and a half after Padampa Sangye's passing, into a whole lore of a Tibetan lore of 7 times born Brahmins, that's connecting Padampa Sangye to as the second Buddha. Actually, he's called Sangye Nipa. Directly, he's sort of the second Buddha, I think, before Padmasambhava gets that. It's Padampa Sangye, and he becomes the paradigmatic Bodhisattva 7 born one. And anyways, and his birth and death are closely associated with Avalokiteśvara as well. And so then it's Guru Chuang who kind of puts all of that together, and drawing from the Shiche tradition very explicitly in different ways, kind of combines. He starts to, he's revealing Avalokiteśvara's 7 born flesh from the soil, and then he integrates that into a pill, which had already started in the Shiche tradition a little bit before, and creates but encapsulates that in a whole Avalokiteśvara sadhana cycle that then is a drupchen kind of ritual.
But interestingly, you have all these huge bulk of history that you now give me. But what I see at the same time seems to be, when ingesting the pill, all of this is made present. Is the direct connection to, like, you have this whole story of, in this case, Padampa Sangye, but with Guru Chewang, also Guru Rinpoche, and you have this build-up of a story, but then you get the pill, and it's like, as a confirmation, it's right there. It's the direct connection of the person with faith to the whole thing that comes before. That's the way I would perceive it.
Yeah, no, that's really well put, I think. And seems to be that's the real potency of it. It's just kind of and then it's in your body.
Yeah.
And you're kind of you're metabolizing that whole rich history, and that's a part of you now as a consumer. So it's quite, I like the way you said it.
Yeah. Also, I think one can safely say that the Tibetan culture doesn't have the same inhibitions with, like, also corporeal remains and deceased lamas that are mummified, for example, that sometimes like a piece of hair or a nail would then be actually used to be ground up and used in a whole bunch of pills to bless it, which in our societies often this might provoke people to the utmost extent, the thought. But in the Tibetan societies, is seen as the most valuable you can like use into this.
Absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, that was Desideri, the Christian missionary who went to Tibet in the 17th century, had really very negative things to say about this
Yeah.
practice. Precisely. And actually, Kawaguchi, the Japanese explorer in Tibet,
Hmm.
later, also strangely, despite the Japanese fascination with precisely these kinds of things, had very negative things to say as well, as though he was sort of copying Desideri's revulsion.
Hmm.
So it's really very interesting. And but one thing that is part of that, I think, is we forget a little bit that in Europe and also in China, and human bodily substances were used in medicine for quite a long
Yeah,
time. And we sort of,
it's actually
I mean, there is this revulsion, but there is also this history.
our history does have it, but it's not something that has been kept up, and there are huge. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, now it does elicit
yeah,
the greatest revulsion. It's true.
yeah. This reminds me, for example, that there's some mummified bodies of great lamas, and they are kept sometimes within the community as the main point of reference, like the so-called Kudung, or the holy body of Pema Degyal, who was brought from Tibet to Orissa when this Tibetan community escaped 59, and they actually set up the mummified body in a small stupa as the main object of reference within their temple. And
Mm,
the whole community goes to pay homage to do the worship practices. And for the community, it's actually the healing aspect. They find that um, they receive healing benefits from being close to the relics or being close to the mummified body. That's the Namkha Kyungsong community. They are, you can say, a branch of the Düjom Tessa, and they do a lot of pill rituals as well with the Trema Nakmo practice.
oh,
So
nice.
just as we discussed before, 7 days of intensive meditation as a drupchen meditation and ritual, and then under the supervision of the head lama, they all gather once a year, and they have a huge pile of like medicinal substances that they then roll into pills, all the practitioners, and distribute widely.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah. So
Love to
this is
listen
what
to.
I'm mostly in contact with, what I mostly observed. I think in Western Buddhism, pill making has never really taken root. Also, it's a strenuous process. You have to know a lot. You also have to have all the substances, have to be very detailed in the reading of the commentaries, and it brings me back. That's the Nyongdrol, the liberation by taste aspect, and we have all the other ones: liberation by wearing, very famously, of course, liberation by hearing, the famous Bardo Todol, which is the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and then you have the Gendrol, liberation by reminding, which is actually more a meditative practice. Tongdrol, liberation by seeing. And I think you also have been going quite a bit into researching on the Takdrol, the liberation by wearing, the
Yes.
amulets.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I've spent a lot of time researching the Takdrol through the early Bima Nintik tradition,
Mm-hmm.
and then how it sort of transforms over time into the Khandra Nintik, as revealed in the early 14th century because there you have the main root tantras are all titled tactral. So there's these
Mm-hmm.
6 tantras, and then there's 6 tactral tikas, as they're called, and then there's further commentaries and a bunch of texts that are tactral, but very much rooted in this earlier Pima Nyingtik cycle. And that's a really interesting one. This what they call the Sangye Sejik, or the Tempa Pujik, this only child of the, or only son of the teachings, sometimes
Mm-hmm.
called, or only son of the Buddhas.
Mm-hmm.
And that sort of presents itself as the original tactral, I guess you could say. But then there's also the Dra Telgyur, which is the,
Mm-hmm.
the sort of root tantra of the 17 tantras, which also presents itself as the original tactral. So there's a bit of a, and then they have a kind of cosmogony, and there's a little bit of conflict over, and there's concern, you can tell, among commentators to really position one or the other at the very fountainhead of this, of the, not just the Nyingtik tradition, but of all Buddhist scriptures. So there's a
Mm-hmm.
kind of sense in which, okay, the universe is resonating with reality. It's the
Mm-hmm.
Jinyaranga. And then, the first crystallization of that, or sort of expression of that, is this scripture. Which scripture is it?
Mm-hmm.
And so then that becomes the basis of this idea that, it's the only child scripture, the only son of the teachings, or the only, and so it's this anyway. But then you have the Dra Telgyur too, which has it sort of in the title, that it's this kind of consequence of sound, or something, entailment of sound, of resonance. So there's
Mm-hmm.
some kind of an interesting linguistic theory that's encoded there, in these Dzogchen tantras, that means, physical contact can also sort of, like, you're basically carrying a Buddha when you put one of those things on. That's a
Mm-hmm.
Nirmanakaya, or sometimes a Sambhogakaya form, and then that's sort of communicating to you on some subtle level.
So what my impression is that the tactile liberation upon wearing is much more entwined with the Dzogchen tradition, much more entwined also with the doctrine of Dzogchen and the empowerment of Dzogchen. The distinction between the teaching and the object of wearing becomes almost indistinguishable, which is kind of really difficult if one continues to think in dichotomy of mind and matter, of a division of things and mental. For me, the stunning thing was quite like maybe 15 years ago. There was Taklung Tsetru, the head of the Jangtia tradition. He was in the Czech Republic. I had great respect for him, so I went, and it was a tactile empowerment. And in fact, the whole empowerment was an entirely hyper-detailed Dzogchen empowerment, but for an amulet. But the practitioners, all people present, were empowered into the Dzogchen cycle, which was like very elaborate. It took the whole day. And somehow it was also about an amulet. But you were not making an amulet. You were not getting an amulet. So the empowerment was an empowerment into mind practice, but it was to make an amulet. Something very unusual.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, that's a really, I find that to be an extremely fascinating and profound aspect of the Dzogchen tradition. That sort of that calling into question this boundary between the material and the discursive, or the mental and the material, and the I mean, there's sort of two traditions of the amulet for this
Mm-hmm.
particular amulet. The only child, or only son, or whatever, where one is actually a practice text with detailed instructions on the entire Dzogchen Nyingtik path of practice, including the sort of cosmogony, the source of it, and extolling its virtues and everything, in uh you know broken into chapters and everything, then folded into a little booklet, and that's the
Mm-hmm.
amulet. And that seems to have been the original form of it historically. And then eventually, by the 14th century, we have more of the diagrammatic style of amulet,
Mm,
where it's the sixth chapter only, which is a bunch of mantras
hmm.
extracted, and there's another tantra that goes with it, the sort of Vyakya tantra, if you will, and then that's kind of an explanatory tantra that's telling you how to do that. Then that became popular, but it seems that both really coexisted, the written out portable booklet as well as the diagrammatic
Mm,
form. But always, as you say, like, as part of a whole initiatory tradition where really you're being introduced to the nature of your mind body complex entirely and the whole path. And then eventually you would have this amulet to wear that would be also of not just a token of but an embodiment or crystallization of the lineage itself.
yeah, it's almost like the wearing of the amulet on the body becomes synonymous with the wearing of the received transmission in mind. I mean, at this, not if you simply get an amulet well packed up and you get it as a gift, but in this steps, feels like it. I think also some of the older generation Nakbas, they have a takdra on their head, or this might be the text you're talking about, wrapped up into almost like a box-shaped form, and they tie it to their top knot.
Yes, yeah, yeah. That's a whole tradition. And sometimes they tie it under the armpit too, because
Mm-hmm.
there's some instruction that, I mean, there's different ways of doing it, but there's part of one of the instructions is that it must be touching the skin at all times. You would not remove it. It would not,
Yeah.
you wouldn't let it, the heat from the contact dissipate, is the way the
Mm.
text puts it. So that, I mean, of course, that creates an issue with showering and whatnot, but
Yeah. A certain
but then there are
fermentation
instructions
process
for
might happen.
where, yeah, exactly. There are interesting instructions for where you might put it when you have to take it off,
Hmm.
and how you have to comport yourself when you're prostrating.
Hmm.
So you wouldn't really want to lower it.
Mm.
So you have to do something with it in order to prostrate, because it should be prostrated too. So it's kind of complication of
Ah, yeah.
physical comportment becomes a kind of logistical issue.
Yeah, but also these amulets are again distributed in many forms. They're also, I mean, not only the Dzogchen amulets, I saw many like protection yantras, Tara yantras, and so forth. And depending on the teachers, their activity is, what their liking is. I mean, there's certain teachers who never give out these kind of things. Others, they arrive with the whole, you might say, with the whole container of substances and amulets and strings and so. And I want to make sure that everybody who passes doesn't leave empty-handed.
Yeah, true. It's like you say, it's kind of stylistic difference.
Yeah.
There's some lamas really don't like to work with those kinds of things. Um, it's fascinating, or maybe that's depending on the perceived expectations of the audience. So I know there have been a few times where I've had the occasion to travel with the same lama to, say, the United States, and
Hmm.
then to Malaysia, and it's very different kinds of packing that's
Yeah.
involved, and different kinds of teachings given
Yeah.
to the audiences.
Thank you so much, James, for sharing this with me and for giving us so many insights in another aspect of practice I have not been able to cover, and that is very difficult to cover because it gets very little attention in Western academia and also maybe in Western Buddhism, in such detail at least. And I feel it's another really important piece to understand the entirety of practice tradition, especially when you look at the Nyingma Dzogchen complex. It's very so infused. And as you say, also the Gelugpa, the fifth Dalai Lama. So I think it concerns a lot of practitioners, that we all can have some more precise ideas on the importance of substances. Thank you so much.